Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just welcome everyone to the telephone town hall this evening. I want to thank you for joining us. I know that you watch the news and you know what happened, but you know me. I always want to bring you up-to-date information and tell you what happens behind the scenes. So we spent all day on Friday and into, after midnight, working to pass this legislation. So we voted on one bill, which is the infrastructure bill that we're going to talk about now. And the other vote we took was a procedural vote. So we didn't actually vote on the human side of the infrastructure. We voted on the roads and bridges and highways, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That's what we actually voted on. The procedural piece for the human infrastructure, where you look at housing and childcare and family leave and all of those other programs that we desperately need, the procedural vote basically said we approved Congress to take an official vote on the package. This is something that we do routinely for every bill. It's called a rule. You have to vote on the rule before you actually vote on the bill. We voted on the rule that said by November 15th, we will have a second bill, and that will be the Build Back Better bill, the human infrastructure part of the legislation, which I'll talk about in more detail in a minute. That vote will take place November 15th. But what we passed was absolutely historic. And if you just think about the last 5 years, do you remember when Trump was president, every week he had Infrastructure Week, and he said that he was going to pass this historic infrastructure package, but it never happened. It never happened beyond a press conference. We never even had a discussion about actually passing legislation. But this is what happens when you change administrations and when you have a President Biden and Vice President Harris. We actually got it done. And I will tell you that as long as I've been in Congress, and I'm in my 11th year now, we have been talking about passing a bill for infrastructure. Well, we have two very special guests with us tonight. And before I introduce them, they are leaders in the Los Angeles area, and they are going to tell us specifically how this bill is going to impact Los Angeles and improve all of our quality of life. But let me just tell you a little bit about the bill that will be coming up on November 15th. This bill is critically important to the Los Angeles area. So I mentioned that one of the things that the bill provides is child care. The bill provides money for family leave. The bill provides a lot of different resources in terms of human resources, human infrastructure to make sure that life is better. I'll go into more detail a little bit later about what else is there. But one key feature of the bill is housing. And I want everybody to know that we are very fortunate in the LA area to have Maxine Waters, who chairs the Financial Services Committee. And I want you to know that I saw the Congresswoman in action. Chairing the Financial Services Committee also gives her the authority over housing. I saw her in action fight for housing to not be cut out of the bill. You remember originally they had talked about a $3.5 trillion bill, and it got cut down to right now 1.75. Housing could have easily have been eliminated from that bill, but if it wasn't for the leadership of Maxine Waters and many other members of Congress, that money could have been cut out. We will get $150 billion in affordable housing investments. This is going to be critical for us as we deal with the homelessness issue, because $7.2 billion is provided for individuals and families who are at risk of homelessness, and it also provides money, thousands and thousands of vouchers for people who need homes, and also $1 billion for rental assistance. Now, one of the problems that we've had in our area, of course, is that there's people who are on the streets who are homeless, but there's also thousands of people who are at risk of homelessness. So this bill provides resources to address that. And of course, this is one of the key areas in our country. It also provides home care for older Americans and people with disabilities. I mentioned child care. It extends the child care tax credit. And I hope that many people on this call are receiving checks every month, the child tax credit. And pay attention to your mail, because we're going to be sending information out about the child tax credit very, very soon. That should be hitting your mailboxes, because we want to make sure that everybody that is eligible is receiving their checks already. And so when this bill is signed by President Biden, those checks were due to end at the end of the year. But this bill, when it is signed by the president, will extend those checks for an entire other year. And this can make a significant contribution to reducing childhood poverty. The bill also strengthens the Affordable Care Act, and it helps people with Medicaid and Medicare. And so this is just a very, very significant bill. Now, of course, after November 15th, when it is passed, I will do another telephone town hall to make sure that everything that I just said actually stayed in the bill. I do believe it will, but you know what happens in Congress. Sometimes late at night, things can change. And so to make sure that that doesn't happen, I will do another telephone town hall with you. So right now, I want to introduce two very, very special guests. Stephanie Wiggins is the Chief Executive Officer of LA Metro, a lifelong trailblazer and champion of equity and inclusion. She is the first African-American woman to lead the agency. She oversees the third busiest transit system in the U.S. and serves as the lead transportation planning, programming, and financing agency for the 10 million residents of LA County. Our second guest is David Levitique. He is the Deputy Executive Director of Stakeholder Engagement for the Port of Los Angeles, which together with the Port of Long Beach, just think about this, accounts for 40% of the container traffic into the United States. That means everything that comes in the country from overseas, 40% of it comes in our area. So in March of last year, he worked alongside the Port Executive Director to assist in getting critical personal protective equipment into the hands of healthcare workers, and he continues to build relationships with public and private sector partners to enhance port operations. So I want you to join me in welcoming them, and I want to ask our CEO, Stephanie Wiggins, to talk about what we passed in Congress and how we are going to see the impact of it in the Los Angeles area. I might add now, the bill that we passed goes directly to President Biden's desk. It had already passed the Senate, so this is law. The only reason the president hasn't signed this bill right now, he will sign it next week, is because a number of members of Congress are in Scotland for the climate conference, and he wants to do a Rose Garden signing because, again, this is a historic piece of legislation. So, Stephanie Wiggins, tell us how it's going to help us in Los Angeles.
Well, thank you, Representative Bass. It is a genuine pleasure to join you tonight to talk about how this new bill will impact Metro, or actually, as you said, law practically. And it truly is historic. I also first want to thank you for your leadership on this bill, because I think we all agree that it will modernize America's infrastructure, and in particular, our transit infrastructure. Let me be clear how significant your vote and leadership has been. This bill is the largest federal investment in public transit ever. It's a game changer, and it will be a game changer for LA. Before I share some brief specifics, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge your decisive leadership in reforming LA's local hire rules, and how you worked with President Obama and now with President Biden to allow Metro to hire people locally for local projects being built in their communities. We thank you for your efforts on that, Congresswoman, because this infrastructure, remember, in the title is jobs. Local hire is jobs. We know that for every $1 billion that is invested in public transit, approximately 50,000 jobs are created. So this big news is bigger than big. It is a game changer. Your vote is a once-in-a-generation vote on an infrastructure bill. The impact to LA Metro and the constituents in the 37th District is significant. One, it's doubling the size of our capital investment grant program to $4.6 billion. So what does that mean for LA? That means we'll be able to build more transit projects to serve the 10 million people in LA County. This funding will directly expand mobility choices not only for the constituents in the 37th Congressional District, but for residents across LA County by expanding our already growing rail network. So why is that important? A recent study found that in the LA region, a car allows for 17 times more access to destinations than transit. So we've got to build out our rail network. This infrastructure bill will actually help us do that. It will also increase funding for bus and bus facilities by tens of billions of dollars. What does that mean for LA? Well, over 80% of our riders ride the bus. The buses are the backbone of our congestion relief efforts. So this infrastructure bill helps LA purchase zero-emission buses. It will help us establish the electrical infrastructure to operate these new vehicles. It also includes federal funding. It will expand programs that ensure that the air we breathe is clean for our communities. And this money will also be used by the ports, and David can talk about that even more, but help secure zero-emission trucks as well. So we also see $18 billion identified in this bill for state of good repair. That really helps keep our existing bus and rail fleet working in great condition. There are also new programs, and there's really literally dozens, Congresswoman, of new and better funded programs in this bill that will deliver much-needed resources to LA Metro for years to come. And last but not least, I'm incredibly proud that with the full support of you and the administration, if not most of these programs are going to focus on equity with the Justice 40 initiative. And so this is a welcome step and the first of its kind by the administration to ensure that at least 40% of all the federal funding benefits disadvantaged communities. So as the U.S. Department of Transportation starts working on deciding how to apportion out this funding, you can be sure that LA Metro will be working with your office, the White House, and the Department of Transportation to make sure we are getting our fair share of the funding. Thank you.
And thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Now we would love to hear from David Levitique.
Good evening. Thank you, Congresswoman Bass, for inviting me to participate in this town hall. And I want to echo what Stephanie said. This bill, it's a game changer for transit, but it's also a game changer for ports. Ports for many, many years, if not decades, has struggled to get dedicated funding to support our infrastructure. It's unique. We talk a lot about multimodal infrastructure, and what does that mean? The port is a transit gateway for cargo. So we accept ships and move cargo from ships onto trains and from ships onto truck, and then all that cargo travels through the region. And so getting investment dollars to the specific types of infrastructure that support freight movement is critically important. And if you need any more proof into how important that is, just look at the nightly news and the stories about major port gateways around the world being congested and experiencing unprecedented levels of disruption. Ports are busier than ever. We have seen, because of the COVID-19 pandemic shutdowns and the increase in goods consumption, that was further supported by stimulus funding and people staying at home and ordering things online, we've seen extraordinary increase in volume since summer of 2020. We're moving close to 1 million cans of containers of goods a month. We're averaging around 900,000. We actually had 1 month where we moved 1 million in 1 month. And that represents a lot of efforts by terminal operators and the longshore workers to move cargo, but we're still packed to the gills. And one of the ways we need to get out of that is getting dedicated infrastructure investment. So the infrastructure bill has dedicated $17 billion to ports. That's water infrastructure and that's landside infrastructure. So we see a terrific opportunity with over $2 billion over 5 years being dedicated through the Port Infrastructure Development Program, where we see that going here in the LA Trade Corridor is going to projects that are going to support and alleviate the congestion we see. So we have in mind, for example, an 80-acre site on the port property within Terminal Island that'll act as a support facility to accept empties. Right now, there are empty containers sitting on chassis. Those are the wheels that the containers sit on in local and surrounding communities throughout the entire region. Those need to go somewhere. So this infrastructure funding can go to create facilities like an empty depot, an 80-acre empty depot at the port that will take these containers out of the communities, free up chassis so those truckers who are struggling to pull containers out of the terminals have access to the equipment and can bring more cargo out and relieve the congestion. You'll see those ships at anchor begin to come down. So long term, we think this infrastructure funding is a huge game changer because it's going to give us the ability to invest in facilities that will allow our system to flex as we experience cargo surges like the historic cargo surge we're currently experiencing. We also think this funding can go towards workforce training centers and making sure that we have an adequate number of warehouse workers or truckers, that we are reskilling and upskilling and helping workers transition as we introduce zero-emission equipment, whether it's zero-emission drayage trucks or zero-emission cargo handling equipment. So we think that this bill is going to help, this funding is going to help us with bricks and mortar investment, help create a more efficient system, and more importantly, make sure that this system that moves so much freight is also driving creation of jobs in surrounding communities. So we're really excited about it, really excited you're giving us the opportunity to talk about how important it is for us. Thanks so much.
Well, and thank you so much. You know, one of the things that I believe all of us have seen, which is when we go into stores, you see empty shelves or you see products where you have to wait for. I mean, David, isn't that how we are directly experiencing what is happening with all of those ships out there?
That's right. That's right. I think that the cargo that is on these ships in the water or in the terminals, these are the everyday products you see on store shelves, but also 25% of the cargo coming through the ports of LA and Long Beach are going into the manufacturing supply chain. So this is also important commodities that are inputs into things that American businesses are making for export. We've seen exports suffer as a result. 24 of the last 25 months, we've seen a decrease in U.S. exports. And that means those are opportunities, those are U.S. jobs and economic opportunity that is being missed.
And one of the things that was really critical was that we get this bill passed and move some of those ships because of Christmas coming up and because of the real demand we're going to have. So hopefully some of those ships will be able to be unloaded and those goods distributed into our stores around the country and especially in our area. So thank you so much. I do want to refer some questions to our two guests. And one question that is asked, I will actually answer unless our guests want to chime in about it. Lola from West LA is saying she heard a lot about how the underground piping is old and will it be addressed in the infrastructure bill. You know, I didn't have on a guest specifically today to address that, but you are right. That was a major part of the legislation. You know, we all saw the problem in Flint, Michigan a couple of years ago with the lead in the pipes. but I'm sure you're aware that is a situation that is happening around the country because the country's infrastructure has been neglected for so long. And so how that directly impacts LA, though, I'll put a pin in that and get back to you. We will find out the answer. But the basic question, that money is included in the bill. And so anything that's included in the bill, there is a share of it that comes to Los Angeles. This is a question for you, Ms. Wiggins. This is from Scott Kramer from West LA. He wants to know how the infrastructure bill is specifically going to affect individuals in West Los Angeles.
Well, one of the opportunities we have with the infrastructure bill is to complete projects like the Purple Line subway. It also will help create new jobs. We have a need to fill jobs, namely construction-related jobs, but also other types of jobs, whether it's engineers, planners. We will be hiring up to support delivering, the planning and delivering of these projects, as well as the ability to build more projects that were identified in Measure M. So look for new opportunities and new transit projects and better bus service that will occur in West LA as a result of this bill passing.
Will the bill also allow us to convert, and maybe this is not an issue for Metro, maybe it's the school district, but convert some of our buses so that they are electric and do not use diesel?
Absolutely, Congresswoman. School buses are explicitly identified in this bill. So there is funding in this bill to convert school buses to zero-emission buses.
Thank you very much. Lynn Harvey from West LA wants to know why we are taking a vacation instead of staying in D.C. to complete the voting on the BBB bill. It seems the more it's delayed, the less likely it is to impact the voters and more likely to lose the midterms. I just have to tell you, oftentimes it's reported in the news that we're on vacation. I couldn't even tell you when the last time I took a vacation was. When we are not in D.C., we're not on vacation. D.C. is recessed, which means we are not voting, but staff who do the actual writing of the bills, trust me, are working around the clock on the BBB bill to have it ready for when we get back. You often hear members of Congress and other elected officials talk about bills they write. We don't actually write the bills. Staff write the bills. Lawyers write the bills. And so that is what is taking place now. The reason we take a recess is so we can come home and meet with our constituents. And on that note, I want to mention to people, I am very anxious to go back to having physical town halls in person. And I know that beginning today, the requirements that if you're going to go in and have a gathering, you have to show that you have been vaccinated. And so I did have a poll question and wanted to ask constituents that are on the line, would you be interested in me holding a in-person telephone town hall? Maybe when we talk about the next bill, maybe we do it in person in addition to a telephone town hall. So I would like to know if you are interested in a physical town hall. Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. Would you be willing to attend a town hall now? Of course, bringing your vaccination card, showing us that you have been double or triple vaxxed. Would you be interested in attending a town hall? And if you would be, I will be more than happy to do that. I will tell you that a lot of the questions that are coming in the queue are really about the next bill and not so much about this bill. So I am going to look for some questions that are about this bill, and we will save your questions about the next bill. To the extent that I might know the answers, I will let you know, but you should know that that bill is still being worked on. And so I can give you general answers, but we don't have all of the answers just yet. I can tell you, though, the answers around housing is done, and that section, again, was led by Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She fought to make sure that it was not eliminated when the bill was reduced from 3.5 to 1.75. So Emily from Culver City, I just lost Emily from Culver City's question. Emily from Culver City wants to know about why Democrats aren't blocking and calling out the Republicans and standing up for themselves. Why don't the Democrats fight? I will tell you that this is a really tough question for me because I've been feeling this, Emily, more and more myself, especially in regard to the filibuster, because it seems like, as you watch the news, it seems like that there's two people in control of the Senate right now on the Democratic side, and that's Manchin and Sinema. And I think that one of the problems that we have here is that the senators are in office for 6 years, and I happen to believe that Sinema and Manchin just got reelected. So I think they are betting that by the time they come up for reelection again, that nobody will remember and everybody will be so concerned about us maintaining Democratic seats that that's all that they will care about. So I happen to think that we do need to change the filibuster because I think the existential question of our time, which is voting rights, if we don't change the filibuster, I don't believe that the Republicans are ever going to vote for democracy. And let me say, Dan wants to know what is being done to strengthen our power grid. There are constantly power outages in my area. Well, I certainly hope that this bill will provide some relief there because strengthening the grid is absolutely a part of what was provided in this bill. And so hopefully you will see some differences there. Al from Culver City is talking about the minority business part, DBE, disadvantaged businesses, utilization on construction projects, and will that be encouraged? It absolutely will be encouraged, and it is a part of the legislation. And I will say, having a president who is committed to equity is going to make sure that that is a part of how the money is distributed. But, you know, it's one thing to put it in a bill. It's another thing to keep your eye out and to make sure that it's absolutely implemented. And that is something that we have to make sure of. One person wants to know whether or not there's going to be help. Mrs. Jackson wants to know whether or not there's going to be help for historically black colleges. There is protests going on in Howard University with the students sleeping in tents, not because they're homeless, but because they're angry that their dorms are in such disrepair that they're sleeping outside. When we do pass the next bill, there will be money for historically black colleges and colleges in general. One individual was asking about homeless veterans and whether or not there was resources for homeless veterans. Well, again, that is in the next bill, but what I can tell you about is what we were able to do. A number of us were able to do, your members of Congress from this area, myself included, we all were at the VA several weeks ago with the VA secretary, and we were there pushing the secretary to do something around all of the veterans that were sleeping outside on San Vicente Boulevard. And so the secretary basically threw a hammer down and said he wanted this cleaned up. And so I know you know that the sheriff came along, and our sheriff, we can have a whole telephone town hall conversation about him, so we won't go into that right now. I think his motivation was different. But I did just arrive in Los Angeles, literally just landed 2 hours ago, but it's my understanding that the veterans have been moved into housing and are no longer on San Vicente. So I hope that is accurate. I will make sure that I drive by there, though, while I am home, which is just for a few days. But again, one of the reasons why we recess is so we can come back in our district and we can have meetings exactly like that. I'd like to ask our guests if there is anything else that they would like to add. Please tell us about what is going on in Metro that maybe doesn't have to do with this legislation, but how things are progressing on some of the major projects that impact the 37th Congressional District. Ms. Wiggins.
Well, I would just like to share with the constituents about a new program that our board launched last month, and that is our Fairless program for K through 14. So it is free Metro fare on Metro as well as participating transit for students. We think it is a big step forward into providing Fairless for all low income, but we are delighted to have partnered with a number of school districts, including LAUSD, to provide this benefit to when all of the schools participate, over 1 million students. And then it also extends to all our community colleges in LA County. So very excited to share that news. For more information, all you have to do is call your administrator at the school or at the school district to find out more information about our Go Pass program. That's what we're calling the new Fairless program for K through 14.
Wonderful, wonderful. David, Levitique?
Yeah, just a quick update. As you know, we've been working really closely with the Biden administration to provide immediate relief on the supply chain issues that we're facing here in the San Pedro Bay ports, beginning with Secretary Buttigieg hosting a roundtable back in July. We've been in constant contact with the administration, and we stood up a program called Accelerate Cargo LA, where we're working with those name brand retailers, Congresswoman, that we all rely on for our Christmas goods. So to make sure that they're getting their cargo out of the terminals and into onto store shelves. That is a program we stood up back in September, and we're helping them find truck power, find the equipment necessary to get cargo out of the terminals, and we're in constant contact with the presidential port envoy, John Porcari, making sure that these very operational issues, basic blocking and tackling of getting cargo out of the terminals, getting empty containers loaded onto ships back to Asia. We're making sure all that's happening, and we're getting a good response from our supply chain partners. We initiated a fee to encourage and to penalize cargo owners who keep cargo dwelling in the terminals for too long, and we've seen a tremendous response. When we announced the fee, there were about 94,000 containers on our terminals. Today, there's roughly 85,000. So we are seeing that number come down, and we're hoping that's going to free up terminal space, and you'll start seeing the number of ships reduce as well. But we're still seeing a huge consumer import surge, consumer-driven import surge. So we are predicting that you're still going to see elevated volumes through much of 2022. On a separate note, last week, the Port of Los Angeles adopted a new program where we're going to collect funding, and we're going to dedicate that funding to the deployment of zero-emission freight trucks operating in and out of the port. We're hoping to partner with the federal government and the state government and Metro to transition all the freight trucks that call out of the port into zero-emission drayage truck by 2035.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Ms. Wiggins, I actually have another question for you. If you have any updates about Metrolinx on Crenshaw and Hyde Park.
Sure. Well, we're getting closer, working with the contractor to reach substantial completion. Hope to reach substantial completion by early next year. And in fact, we're going to accept the project in phases. So we'll have a partial substantial completion before the end of this year, and then full substantial completion after the new year. So what is substantial completion? That means that's the point when the contractor is completed with all of their work. What work do they have left to go? Because I recently went out there and toured the Crenshaw line. They're just doing a lot of testing. There are 8,000 different types of tests that need to be completed and all need to pass in order to ensure all the fire, life, and safety elements are working properly before we take over the project from the contractor. That's what substantial completion will allow. And once we get substantial completion, then we do our own training of our operators that will last about 4 to 6 months, and then we will open up Crenshaw. So we're getting closer. It's taken longer than we've wanted, but we want to make sure we deliver the type of quality infrastructure improvement project that the community deserves. So we're getting there.
And thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to thank our special guests for joining us here this evening, Stephanie Wiggins, the CEO of LA Metro, and David Levitique, the Deputy Executive Director for Stakeholder Engagement for the Port of Los Angeles. We really appreciate you joining us this evening, and I hope that you won't mind when we call you back again, because we love getting up-to-date information to all of the constituents. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
You're very, very welcome. I would now like to ask another poll question. If you are joining us tonight from a cell phone and you would like to receive alerts from our office by text, please press 1. And we will send you alerts. The type of alerts we will send you will be about events coming up, if we're having town halls, or if there is breaking news that impacts the Congressional District 37. So press 1 if you want to receive text messages from us, and press 2 if you do not. And I will tell you that on our first question about having an in-person town hall, it was overwhelming. So we will figure out how to do it safely. We will ask everyone to bring their vaccine cards, and we will give you an update. And I will say that we will have a town hall when we are assured that the second bill will make it to President Biden's desk. Let me respond to a few questions in the queue. And I mentioned that most of the questions in the queue are about the next bill. And we will save all of those questions and we will get back to you, because we do have your contact information. But most of those questions are about a bill that is still in process. And so we will answer to the best of our abilities. But there was one question that said, what about all of this infighting between the Democrats, and why can't we all get along and stand together like the Republicans? Well, I will admit it was a little frustrating this last week waiting to get the bill passed, but I think a lot of fire has been pointed at the progressives. But let me tell you that both sides, the progressives and the moderates, at different times held up the bill for different reasons. The moderates at the beginning of the week decided that they did not want to vote for the human infrastructure bill until they knew exactly how much it was going to cost. Now, that annoyed a number of us because they could have made that request a long time ago, but they made it at the last minute, literally the day before we were going to vote on the bill. The progressives were holding out because, honest and truly, they have lost faith, not in the president and not in the speaker, but in the Senate and in specifically Manchin and Sinema. They lost faith that if we voted for the human infrastructure bill in the House and sent it over to the Senate, that it might not pass. And I might remind you that I'm a little sympathetic to that, considering I led the effort around police reform, and we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act twice out of the House, only for it to linger in the Senate. It is not dead. It's just sitting on somebody's desk over there, Chuck Schumer's desk, I guess, waiting for it to come up for a vote. So what you have is the Democratic caucus, the Democratic Party, is extremely diverse in every single way, and including in terms of perspective. You talk about the Republicans standing together, but if you remember a few years ago, the Republicans were doing as much infighting as we were. The difference is when Trump became president, because he has turned the party basically into a cult, everybody marches in lockstep, but not for a good reason. They march in lockstep out of fear. And prior to January 6th, they used to be afraid of a primary, somebody running against them. But I want you to know that after January 6th, my colleagues who are Republicans have told me that their fear now is for their safety. because things have become so violent when they decide to take a different position. And my colleagues that have been brave and voted for impeachment and voted, against Trump and have been speaking out against him, I want you to know that they suffer threats on their lives all the time. So that is it for our call this evening. I want to thank you all for joining. We will do another call as soon as the next bill passes, and we are assured that it will make President Biden's desk. Stay tuned. We will have an in-person we'll have an in-person town hall meeting, which will be the first one since 2019. We are slowly but surely coming out of this, and I certainly hope that the thousands of you that are on this call today all have received your vaccine and are doing well. Thank you very much, and good evening.